With an ever-arrogant look, the woman greeted the Duke, who was in no hurry to reply reciprocate. After a small pause, Cesare turned in her direction and then headed towards her, thereby heating the situation. He said that he was not worried about how she teaches that despicable, but he would prefer that she would not be zealous. The woman worshipped dutifully, after which she asked for forgiveness. I hope that she would not get something more seriously. But then the Duke frowned, menacingly asking him not to annoy him again, otherwise she could greatly regret it. Flavia shuddered when he added that she was a wise woman, so he should understand what he was trying to say. When the woman came out, she thought that this was the cleaner of the shoes of cunning, and she knew what she was going on. Obviously, she deliberately hazed herself until she trampled all her legs, so she will fall out of disgrace. At this time, a delegation of 3 girls discussed that the master had a lover, and they say that she was barefoot. Cesare would not contact a noble lady, but in any case, they have far from the most common relationship. They entered the main wing together, and Cesare was more affectionate than usual, although he had not previously let the girls into the main wing. Suddenly, the red-haired girl jumped sharply, asking loudly who she was, because curiosity burst her. Turning around, she loudly told everyone that Genevieve did not feel it, so she would have to return home. One of the friends pretended to be believed, so she smiled politely and wished her to be careful during the journey. The girl ran down the bridge, along with the way to the friends of the word of farewell, not even hearing a response farewell. One of the friends asked, "It was still normal. Why suddenly she?" The other replied that she was just pretending. Meanwhile, the red-haired girl thought that she needed to report this as soon as possible, Lady Lucretia. She wrote that autumn was in full swing, and the day when her house arrest will end is far from the corner. She will be shocked, but Genevieve cannot but tell her that a gloomy cloud hung over the future lady. Today, the ladies told her when they gathered at the Bonaparte estate in order to admire the mermaid's heart. She found out that Mr. Cesare was found with a girl in her arms, which he brought right into the main wing of the mansion. How many again Mr. Cesare intends to pierce her friend's heart with a knife in order to finally be satisfied? And moreover, what kind of shamelessness this, licked him, Genevieve, wants to meet with a lady rather and give comfort. As soon as the letter was completed, the girl handed it over to the servant, asking him to immediately send him Della Valle. After some time, Lucretia received a letter from her friend, after which he began to study him, trying not to miss anything. As soon as she finished, the letter immediately went to the fireplace, so that no one else except her could read it. Then she asked Cesare that for unusual nonsense was contained in this letter, and whether he was going to experience it again. Meanwhile, people whispered about the last news, about the same rumor that blossomed incredibly quickly. Allegedly, Mr. Cesare hides a woman in the main wing. No one knows who she is, and most importantly, who he is. 3 days ago, when a delegation from Orkanen arrived from a demonstration of the mermaid's heart, they saw how he carried a girl in her arms. Moreover, one girl heard that Henry Fetch fully paid for attempts to pester a woman Cesare. It must be true. It was not without reason that Bonaparte was trimmed from the Fetch family of the entire huge amount of investment in business. Everyone around asked who she was. Will decide that this girl, who sincerely fell in love with Cesare Bonaparte. The next day, Flavia decided that she refused to continue to endure the Goudelin's cheek, the wave of the honor of the Bonaparte clan. I'm walking along the corridor. She thought that it was necessary to get rid of this insidious and impudent shoe cleaner as soon as possible. Without wasting time, the woman rudely opened the doors, attracting the attention of Adelaide, which was waiting for her arrival. At that very moment, the true aristocrat looked at her, who greeted the woman, asking about her health. The woman was shocked, because only 3 days passed, but how she managed to bury so obviously in such a short time. The hollow cheeks began to be rounded, and the wounds on her dirty body almost disappeared, thereby creating a new person. She resembles a girl from the legends that she lured the sailors with her incredible beauty, and this could not pass by Madame. However, the woman did not take her appearance, saying that she heard her appeared before the gentleman in a shameful form. It was required to sit quietly in the mansion, and not to rush around the garden like a child. Then this would not have happened. Still, she ordered to walk to fix the gate, but she still mutilated her legs as the last idiot. Adelaide dutifully bowed and asked for forgiveness, But Flavia added that there was not a drop of sincerity in her. The conversation was adjusted by the conversation, apologizing that she interrupted her, after which she asked for permission to insert a few words. Madame was surprised by the maid of the maid, but gave the go. Ahead, there thanked her for the opportunity. Effany said that it was not so formed in matters of etiquette, but the lady's gait is now fully consistent. Of course, this became possible thanks to first-class lessons from her, which they are both grateful. And in this case, it was time to move on to the next stage of training. The pressure was able to study even more useful skills. Flavia thought that this bad girl even circled Aphonia around her finger, licking pity to her side. So the gentleman also watches everything, so she decided to take his attention to Athoni's opinion in this matter. But still, her classes are not over yet, and until then, she must find a way to throw this cleaner of shoes. Toward evening, go along the corridor. Madame thought that in the end, she was even impossible for the impossible. She quickly grasps and takes into account all the details, too different from other ladies, which immediately fall into hysteria. If she noticed a hint of laziness in her actions, she could have failed. But today, she could not do anything. Suddenly, a female voice called out behind her, because of which the woman broke out of her thoughts, frozen with surprise. The girl with purple eyes laid her hand on her chest and greeted Madame, saying that they had not seen each other for a long time. Flavia thought that it was not for nothing that she was called the first beauty in the highest light, an ideal lady to whom everyone is equal. Lucretia added that she was glad that she was in good health, but it was clear that she arrived in the mansion in some kind of business. The woman decided to ask about this, to which she received the answer that all the people of high society arrived here, so she came. Looking at the employment of the servants, she can assume that a rather magnificent technique is planned for delegates from Orchanen. Mr. Cesare has a strong connection with the empire, and this time he even contributed to the ascent of the new emperor. The girl asked if Cesare was fine. Since she did not go out for some time, they could not see herself. Therefore, she decided to ask Madame if he had something unusual, which she must know about. Flavia realized that rumors reached her. As an adherent to Cesare, she probably was nervous because of what had happened. Since this story will still be disclosed, it is better to hint Lucretia at a family relationship between the two. The woman said that, apparently, she had already heard something, but at the same second she froze, unable to continue. A small pause came, during which Lucretia looked at Madame with a questioning look and expected an explanation. Unable to stand the pause, the girl smiled, tactfully asking if it could be such that she asked a tactless question. Flavia unexpectedly thought that the one who would drive the shoe cleaner would not have to be. Then she smiled slyly, glancing at nothing that did not understand nothing, after which a plan arose in her head. She has already received one warning from Cesare and does not even know what could happen if she falls again. But if Lucretius comes to the stage, if she were an angel in the flesh, she would certainly could not monopolize the place of the bride. Having made the decision, the woman asked the lady, carefully listening to what she would say now, and not to miss anything. Indeed, according to rumors, this woman is Bonaparte's blood family. Such a statement was in earnest a noble lady. Lucretia realized that she was simply mistaken, because it was the daughter of Mrs. Katrina and Mr. Roan, and she invented too much. Flavia decided to add oil into the fire, saying that she was not mistaken in everything, because of which the girl froze and shuddered. She explained that Mrs. Adelaida is definitely a member of the Bonaparte family and younger sister, Mr. Cesare, but in reality, she could be rootless, because they cannot ask parents about it. At that moment, Flavius thought that if Lucretia is insightful enough, you should have understood the meaning of her words. Suddenly, the girl's gaze changed when she thanked Madame for the parting words. It was clear that she understood something. At the end, the lady added with a smile that she always comprehensions of a lot thanks to her. And now I need to think about a lot. The next day, Adelaide was surprised by walks, because she thought that after the incident she was not allowed to go out. Effany explained that the walk is also part of the daily routine of the aristocracy. The young master would not forbid her. The guests planned to take a walk in the lion's garden, so they better go towards the water garden, away from their eyes. From that day, Effony began to study the schedule of guests of the estate and became a little friendlier to her than before. Their relationship also became a little closer, since Aphone constantly had to be next to the lady and help her. The maid explained that the water garden is equipped with a huge hydraulic, so there is something to observe there. This is an incredibly beautiful place, and perhaps she will be amazed to the depths of her soul. She was sure of this. Adelaide smiled, thinking that this was definitely a common pity, but still she was pleased with such an attitude. However, the girl decided to restrain herself, only briefly thanking her, continuing to enjoy hot tea. When they arrived at the place, Adelaida realized that Ethne was telling the truth, and this is a beautiful place in the whole mansion. And thanks to the air-nourished air on the heart, it becomes easy, because of which it was possible to spend a lot of time here. Suddenly they stopped, noticed that someone was already here. Turning his head, they noticed a girl and a maid. Lucretia, with his unchanging smile, also noticed them, after which they were politely greeted. Without wasting time, Ethne hastened to explain to Adelaide who this girl, standing in front of her, froze in shock. She did not expect them to meet so suddenly, because she was not yet ready to enter into a real battle of noble lady. However, the girl decided not to retreat, greeting Lucretia as she taught her Ethone, so as not to fall into the dirt. The guest shuddered, after which she smiled, saying that she did not recall to meet her in salons or balls. Having lowered her head, Adelaida replied that all because she had not yet debuted in the top light, and no one saw her. Lucretia introduced herself, said that she belonged to the genus Della Valle, after which she asked what kind she belonged to. The girl was in no hurry to answer, realizing that the very moment came for which she worked so hard. Having gained air in the chest, she introduced herself to Lucretia, like Adelaide Bonaparte, after which she began to expect a reaction. The interlocutor was dumbfounded by what she heard, because of which she immediately shuddered, unable to believe her ears. She decided that this was a new joke that spread in a social society, although she only recently returned. After a period of self-reflection, she could miss a lot, but Adelaide replied that everything was the way she heard. She really belongs to the Bonaparte family, but due to a series of circumstances, she grew separately from her older brother. Lucretia decided to clarify whether she lives in the same mansion as Mr. Cesare in the main wing of Bonaparte. Adelaide gave an affirmative answer, after which she heard the question whether she thought about leaving for Nati. After all, she has the opportunity to inspect the different corners of Santnara. The girl did not understand what kind of proposal this is. Having lowered her head, Adelaida replied that she was planning to stay next to her family in the near future, not leaving anywhere. After which there was a pause, during which the girls carefully studied the appearance and facial expressions of each other. Adelaide thought that the expression on the face of such a beauty is quite difficult to read, perhaps because she is a real lady. However, maybe she was too nervous. But at that very moment, she was surprised when Lucretia whispered about the obstacle. The girl raised her surprised look at her, but the interlocutor did not study anything evil or threatening. Instead, Lucretius only smiled sweetly, saying that it was very happy about their acquaintance, and she would be glad to communicate from now on. Before leaving, the girl wished that heaven and dew had protected her from the killers, thereby shocking Adelaide. While she looked inquiringly at the interlocutor, she immediately realized that she knew something about her real person. The next second, they watched as Lucretia, along with their maids, leaving them in thought. Ethne said that it would be necessary to report this to the master, the content of the conversation, as well as words abandoned at the end. Let Lady Lucretius will not openly resist the will of the young master, but do not write off her from accounts. Still, barrier reefs can be much worse than an impending wave, so you should be vigilant. A little later, Lucretia sat in a carriage and sobbed, asking what to do while the maid asked what had happened. Through the tears, the lady explained Hazel that it seems Mr. Cesare was again fascinated by some kind of ownerless harlot. The maid could not understand anything, because she herself heard that this girl was the younger sister of Mr. Cesare. Lucretia replied that her hands could not belong to a noble lady, and he brought the girl from the street and called his sister. Moreover, if she never succeeds in holding the master, probably she will want to marry her brother Ezra. Hazel said that if everything is so, then she should not just sit and cry, and they need to do something. If she surrenders, this harlot will take her master from her, and perhaps she will be able to become a member of the de Laval family. Therefore, it is necessary to drive her away. And to the question of Lucretia, how, The maid answered that, to do this with his own hands, continuing to cry, the girl replied that this could not be done, because she did not want to harm someone, it is scary. Heisel immediately regretted a gentle lady, after which she asked not to worry, because she agrees to help her absolutely everyone. Hearing this, Lucretius jumped up from her seat, after which she grabbed the maid by the hand and asking if she was seriously. She replied that she would do anything. The mistress hugged her, saying that she was happy, that she had a faithful maid, until he saw Hazel. An evil smirk appeared on Lucretia's face when she said that her devotion would not forget. A few days later, violent activities reigned in the mansion. The servants were busy, and each was engaged in their duty. Adelita, passing by them, thought that due to the upcoming method of weight, the mansion was standing on his ears without calming down. She herself headed further along the corridor to visit her brother, with whom she had not seen for a long time. Stopping near the door, she remembered that she was quite strictly warned against knocking before entering Cesare's office. Having discarded doubts, the girl opened the door, after which she went inside, and the guy told the master that the guest had come to him. Cesare was distracted from documents, after which he looked at Adelaide, but was in no hurry to say anything. At that very moment, he returned to the papers, with a smile asking the girl as her legs, and whether they went in order. Adelaide bowed, answering that thanks to his anxiety, almost all the wounds had already left and disappeared. The man cast a brief glance at her, after which they dry, and asked, was he worried because he didn't say this? Adelaide decided not to be led to this provocation, answering that she had only given tribute to courtesy and nothing more. However, this worked perfectly, because of which the Duke flinched, tightly squeezing the pen in his hand, surprised at its impudence. However, he decided to restrain his emotions, asking for what purpose she came, because now he was only distracting him. With naivety in the voice of Adelita, she asked if she could at least be at least a little. Surprisingly, Cesare replied that it would not be easy. Then he asked, she is now here only for this question. The girl replied that she had just moved to the capital, and of course, wants to visit the Metropolitan Ball like any other lady. The man laughed, answering that he was not aware that his sister had such a cute side, because he had not seen her before. Then he added that she finally adapted to her new role, and now it was very similar to an aristocrat. At the same moment, the assistant Cesare, who was staring at Adelaide all this time, gave his voice, paying attention to himself. The man decided to let them introduce himself to each other, after which he pointed to his younger sister, calling her name. Then he pointed to Gigi Manfred, who said with a smile that he was the personal secretary of the master. And part-time, he is the deputy corporation Stallone, controlled directly by Bonaparte. Gigi said that she was very beautiful. Even at the same time, he saw that the mermaid was floating from sea depths to him. Cesare said there were too many empty words, but the guy continued to say that this is true, and he was a successful person. Then he began to shout that these documents should be carefully studied, after which they began to bicker among themselves. Standing in front of them, Adelaide thought that she did not give a look, but from the moment she met Cesare, something had changed. She does not leave her feeling that from her soul a layer behind the layer is cut off with a sharp blade, and she could not do anything about it. She decided to forget about the shoes with which he pressed on her sore leg, and about all the words that her heart wounded. Suddenly, Cesare asked if she met with Lucretia. He gave him iron that she received an entertaining warning. The girl answered in the affirmative, and the Duke added that if Phony is known about secular conversations than the shoe cleaner. He was interested in it, because why could she get this conversation if she knew that she was his own sister? Drawing ink on the parchment, he asked her to take into account that after the end of the reception, he would present a personal braquier to her. When Adelita replied that she understood everything, the Duke let her go, after which the girl left the office, leaving the men. Cesare was satisfied with the conversation, while Gigi noticed that Brotherhood would arrive only after 2 days. This means that during the reception at which Lady Lucretius will be present, there will be no one to look after the lady. When asked if everything will be all right, Cesare replied that Bonaparte could hardly happen to her at Bonaparte's estate, after which he asked to cook 1 galley for him, but for the ship to be as old as possible, this is a necessary condition. The secretary accepted the order, thinking that he had come for happiness, and he would again have to engage in all sorts of stupid things. Meanwhile, people whispered at the ball that, as expected, Flavia Lorendan also arrived at the solemn reception. Someone heard that Mr. Cesare called her again, although it seemed to them that Lorendan had long lost his trust. Perhaps he intends to return it to the pedestal of society. Then it is worthwhile to worry about strengthening ties with Madame. The woman smiled, thought that their family had lost his position for a while. However, holding closer to Bonaparte, everything would decide. At the same moment, Lucretia turned to her, asking with a smile whether she enjoys this beautiful evening. Flavia replied that it was hoping that she had fun at the ball. She answered in the affirmative, because this is a reception of Bonaparte. She is glad to be in this place and outside the reception, since she is very close to the architecture of this beautiful mansion. The exquisite decoration and scenery are selected with taste. Mr. Cesare has a unique sense of beautiful. Suddenly, the girl asked if they could talk about things from which this beautiful mansion should be rid of. Flavia began to look back, answering, with regards to this topic, she had nothing more to add, and then everything depends only on her. Lucretia asked if she should personally discuss this with Mr. Caesar in this case, to avoid the omissions. Apparently, she has no choice but to tell him about the revelation of the origin of Lady Adelaide. The woman was shocked by such words, answering that it was just nonsense, because it was she who favored Lucretia. The girl replied that she was only a few upset, because the master trusted her, but she revealed her a common secret. Lucretia came closer, saying that she did not intend to confront her in this matter, since they have one enemy, and she just asks Madame to give her a little help in the general business, and their connection will be a secret. Flavia understood that this was a false smile. Behind her a true evil was hiding, which would not allow her to escape in case of something. Having bitten her lip, she asked what Lucretia wanted. She, in turn, relaxed, being a satisfied answer. A few minutes later, music began to play and dance time has come, during which almost everyone found a couple. Meanwhile, Adelaide sat in her chambers and prepared, while Euphony said that it seemed that the reception had already begun. When asked if she should go, the maid replied that she was not an aristocrat, so she does not have such an obligation. Why did she add that the lady should only appear in the ballroom, and all the attention will be focused only on her? The girl thought that if people notice all her weaknesses, then they would immediately cling to them with their teeth and would not let go. Euphony said that preparation for reception is much more fun than the reception itself, because the ladies will never wear one outfit twice. A hat and an umbrella, gloves and dress, necklaces and earrings, even stockings and shoes. All this will have to be purchased every time again. So she will go to Bellastella Street every day to purchase another beautiful outfit. Even living in Camorra, she never visited this street. But this does not mean that the shoes cleaners were ordered there. It was just that place was so shining and beautiful that it seemed to her that she should not approach him. Even the name of boutiques built in a row resembled lines from romantic poems, which she still remembers. She decided to ask the maid to ask whether she answered beautifully there. She answered in the affirmative with a smile, supporting her. Suddenly, they heard a loud knock on the door, because of which they turned around, looking inquiringly in that direction. Euphony said suspiciously that they were not waiting for anyone, but she opened the door, noticing her excited Flavia. Without wasting time, the woman greeted, after which she told the maids that she was in a hurry because she had some business about her. The lady wants to get another report regarding Mr. Cesare, but she needs to go in the record, and Euphony should go with her. The maid was surprised that this was the chairman's request, but she could not refuse her, asking for 1 second. Then she turned around, telling Adelaide that she seemed to have to leave her for a while. She replied that she was not scary. The maid looked at the lady for the last time, feeling something wrong, but Madame reminded that the chairman was waiting. Without wasting time, they went out the door, leaving the girl alone, and Flavia finally glanced at her. In order to somehow dispel boredom, Adelaida sat on the sofa and began to read the book, listening to the melody from the ballroom. Due to the anticipation of visiting Bellastella Street, it is so excited that it is not able to combine letters into words. However, she did not manage to enjoy the book for a long time, as there was another knock on the door, which she did not wait. Raising her head, the girl asked herself who could be, because Euphony could not return so quickly from the chairman. She was in no hurry to rise from her place, to open the door to the one who continued to knock for a long time, and persistently. When the knock on the door began to intensify, the girl froze, hearing a voice in her head who asked her not to open. She tried to understand where this voice came from, because this time in the room, except her, as if there was no one, what was strange. Adelaida decided that she just fiddled, when suddenly the door opened, thereby frightening the lady with surprise. It was a maid who apologized, saying that the situation is urgent, so she was forced to enter without permission. The girl exhaled calmly, since it was just a young maid, after which she asked her what was the matter. Heisel replied that the owner was calling her. Adelaide was surprised that her brother wants to see her precisely before her visit to the ball. Then she looked at the maid, realizing that something was wrong, but she urgently needed to find out what exactly. She looks too young for the maid in the Bonaparte estate, and her clothes are not in size, as she hangs from her. However, if Cesare really called her, then she does not even submit the consequences if she does not agree to fulfill his order. Grasping the shawl, she asked the maid to lead her, but she had to be on a guard in case of some danger. Having passed some distance, Adelaida asked where they're going. Hazel replied that the owner was waiting for her on the roof. But for some reason now, she definitely does not want to follow her. But now she has absolutely no choice. After all, Cesare is not one of those people who would begin to explain their actions to someone if he really expects her there. After a couple of seconds, the maid stated that they came, after which she began to open the door leading to the roof. A sharp wind blew, which immediately raised the air of the shawl of Adelaide, behind which she immediately ran to catch. Meanwhile, Hazel, who was watching her, realized that it would be many times easier than she could count. Apologizing to Adelaide, she pushed her in the back with a sharp and strong movement, wanting to throw her off the roof. Not expecting such a setup, the girl flew down, having only time to cast her an angry look, because she knew that something was wrong. A little earlier, people loudly congratulated the Duke, asking how he manages to be so incredible and irresistible. After all, not only is he the youngest person who became prior, he was also able to put on the throne of the prince of a neighboring country. After all, the current emperor is the cousin of Cesare, so the diplomatic benefit will be serious. The girls added that he was beautiful, and with a good family, with an excellent businesslike grip and magnificent political instinct. Others asked with whom this amazing man would go down the aisle, and whether Lucretius would bother him. Tired of secular conversations and praise, the Duke asked for forgiveness, after which he went out onto the balcony to take a breath a little. He sat down on a chair, after which he took out a cigar and made a puff, enjoying the silence, which he dreamed of from the beginning of the ball. Suddenly, he drew attention to the inscription on the ceiling, which meant initials that they were very familiar with Cesare. He smiled, recognizing the names of Katrina and Rowan Bonaparte, his parents, who were crazy about love for each other. In the days of the ball, these two always danced with each other, and he was seated on the most luxurious chair in the ballroom, so that he does not interfere, in case of will cookies. Then they finally could be with each other for several hours. They were in their own world, where no one was able to interfere with them, which they used perfectly. However, this was too much for such a place, but nothing stopped them until today. Suddenly, Gigi went to the balcony, said that yes, we were already exhausted from the desire to see him. He was smoking in cigars. Looking at the secretary, he was surprised to ask what kind of stupid appearance it was. He came but an arranged technique, putting on a shawl. The guy began to show off, asking if he was going to him, but the Duke asked to stop and remove it until no one saw. Gigi explained that he was just walking, and the shawl itself fell on him from the sky, because the case is the greatest novelist in the world. The displeased Cesare asked if he raised it from the floor, after which he called him the poor, since he committed such stupidity. The guy asked that when he was getting off from Lady Lucretia, would he want to give his heart to some girl? After all, who knows? Maybe thanks to the shawl he has selected, he will be able to meet fate, which he himself is not aware of. Suddenly, his gaze sank to the initials that were embroidered on the shawls. They designated the name of Katrina Bonaparte. This thing of the mother used by Adele Vivi. He asked himself how it turned out that the shawl simply fell from the sky. Without wasting time, the man asked the secretary where he picked her up, wanting to hear as much detail as possible. At the same time, Hazel tried to throw Adelaide from the roof, but she managed to catch on the edge, holding her fingers. Trying not to slip, The girl said that now she remembered everything, and she was the maid that was under Lucretia. Heisel was frightened that she was opened, after which she heard the question whether she forced her to do so and go for it. Then she asked to give her a hand faster, because all the wine would not fall on her but on the mistress. But she received a sharp refusal. Adelaide called her a fool, after which she asked how she thinks whether she would leave her Lucretia alive after that. The maid stepped back, trying to understand what she was talking about, because she knew that her mistress was far from a bad person. However, Adelaide tried to explain to her that she would kill her so that no one would recognize the truth. These words were even more frightened by her. The girl again asked her to give her hand, but the maid refused, shouting that her lady would never have done so. Instead, she ran to the edge of the roof, starting to put her legs on the fingers of the Adelaides so that she would quickly fall. After a few seconds, the girl could not stand the pain, after which she released the edge of the roof and went into a free flight. The youngest prior, the head of the Bonaparte clan, a man gifted with the greatest love of fate and gods, managed to save her. And such a person now lies on a cobblestone pavement, looking at the stars, while the girl fell on him from the sky. Dissatisfied with what was happening, the Duke barely audible cursed. I can't imagine what would happen if he had not been nearby. Rising, he asked the sister whether she was in order, but it was not noticeable that she was getting hurt somewhere. Suddenly, he froze, noticing with surprise a trembling that made her body because she thought that she had come to an end. The man joked, saying that if she did not allow him to touch herself in response, he must stop pawing his chest. This acted instantly, because of which Adelaide sharply pulled away from him, and Cesare was surprised at her behavior. Looking at the roof, the girl said that the maid, in the uniform, pushed her from the roof, also said that he called her. The Duke was surprised, answering with a grin that he did not call anyone, after which he looked at the roof, noticing a runaway silhouette. At that very moment, Adelaide said that she was absolutely sure that it was a servant of Lucretia, who was sent by her. First of all, Gigi quickly climbed to the roof, after which he began to look around in attempts to find the culprit. Then he caught his breath and called out to Cesare, shouting that the criminal was too nimble, and he could not grab her in place. The man asked in response why he even climbed there, because it is obvious that she had already escaped so as not to be caught. The secretary did not hear anything, asking to speak louder, but the Duke completely ignored his requirements. Instead, he drew attention to Adelaide, asking. She was about to come to his room in this form. The girl covered herself, answering that her shawl flew. Cesare said that the shawl was not a chainmail, it was worth pulling her away, and that's it. She said that it was urgent. The man asked if she would have agreed to sleep with someone, since the matter is urgent. Adelaide did not answer, instead of which she looked away, hoping that they would finish the conversation as soon as possible. Cesare did not look away from her, but he completely did not understand what she was thinking about, trying to see something on her face. Then he got up from his place, taking off his jacket and throwing him over the girl so that she would not freeze and did not get sick. The surprised Adelaide thanked him, not expecting such a gesture. The Duke did not answer, straightening his hair on his head. Then he tried to get up, but suddenly felt a sharp pain in his side, because of which he crouched and groaned, trying to breathe. Adelaide turned in his direction, asking worried if he was hurt, after which she paid attention to his side. Looking at the girl, Cesare, with a stone expression on his face, was surprised that the shoe cleaner is now worried about him. Then he drew attention to her legs, which practically healed, asking if she forgot how he stepped on her. Then he replied that if he said that he was hurt, whether she was leaning after him in the bedroom, taking care of his health. Their faces were at a dangerous distance from each other, but at the same moment Gigi ran up to them, asking if they were whole. Cesare rushed in displeasure towards the secretary, who froze sharply, trying to understand what he earned such a look. 20 minutes later, they sat in his office while the doctor was treating the Duke's wound, tried to do everything as best as possible. Then he said that, fortunately, the bruise of the internal organs is not very serious, and serious injuries were avoided. However, for some time, it is worth refraining from physical exertion, and for the period of recovery to throw cigars. Also from tomorrow, he needs daily compresses, so he will send a person. But the Duke refused. Adelaide thought that because of his attitude to business, she had to follow the maid, although it seemed strange. At the same second, the doors opened, and Effene flew inside, who fled to the young master to report. She chattered that she was engaged in searching for my lady because she was gone, after which she asked what happened. Paying attention to her, Cesare said that she was just in time, after which he demanded detailed explanations from her. The next 5 minutes, the girl retold all the events that happened since the preparation of Adelaide for the ball. Ithone apologized, because all this was because of her improving, although some suspicions crept initially. However, Madame Flavius personally told her about this, but Cesare replied that Ithone could not suspect her. At the same second, the doors once again opened, and on the threshold was Gigi, who demanded the attention of the master. With a serious look, he stated that, as was ordered, he ordered the knights to sharpen Madame Flavia Lorendon into custody, and everyone who tries to leave the territory of the mansion will be detained. Also, the gaoler was prepared. Having attached a cigar, the Duke replied that then it was necessary to send it to his dear Madame Flavia as a gift. Then the man smiled, ordering to immediately bring here Lucretia for an explanatory conversation. Some time later, they knocked on the office, after which Gigi went inside, thereby surprising Adelaide. She did not expect a knock, because she was originally strictly punished not to knock on Cesare's room. At that very moment, the girl drew attention to the Duke, who crossed her arms over her chest, saying with a smile that she was quickly. Now she understood the reason for this ban. The knock was a conditional sign, warning of danger and giving time. Placing the sofa, the man with a smile asked Adelaide to sit next to him so that she was present at a conversation. They were announced that Lucretius della Valle had arrived, and Cesare again asked to move even closer to him. The girl slowly entered the room with an embarrassed smile on her face, after which she greeted Mr. Cesare. He smiled and greeted him in response, apologizing that he had to meet her in this form. When Lucretia noticed Adelaide in an embrace sitting next to the Duke, her eyes widened with shock. Her gaze moved to a girl who was sitting with an absolutely indifferent face, but this chose her even stronger. Her heart was pounding furiously, while Cesare invited her to sit down, and not to stand there so that everyone would be comfortable to talk. Somehow, holding herself in her hands, Lucretia smiled sweetly, after which she agreed with the man, taking her place. At that very moment, Adelaide, with a dumbfounded look, paid attention to her maid, who was another girl. She managed to change the maid so as not to cause any suspicions to herself, and not to report the one who tried to kill her. Cesare also noticed this, because of what he asked if this maid was always with her, although he knew the correct answer in advance. Lucretia, with a smile, gave an affirmative answer, saying that it was her maid Anise, who always accompanied her. The Duke decided not to show a look, but immediately answered that he did not think so, and she is now trying to hide something. However, the girl stood firmly on her, stuttering that it was this child who served her all the recently. In confirmation, she decided to ask the maid about it. She only nodded in response, without saying anything. Cesare said that Lucretia has fast handles, and if not for the story of marriage, she would be an ideal business partner. The girl did not expect such a comment, because of which she blushed more, thanking him for such flattering words. The man was surprised that she seriously thanks him for this, but it turned out that the girl agreed with his words. Adelaide thought that, in her opinion, it is obvious that she had already forgotten about an attempt to kill her, and she only thinks about Cesare. At that very moment, the girl realized that she was simply not in her mind, and she could not think about anything except the Duke. After a small pause, Lucretia said, in surprise, paying attention to the half-naked torso of the man. Looking at his wound, she asked if he was injured. Cesare looked down with a smile, also glancing at her. Then his gaze sharply darted to Adelaide, who immediately realized that now he would need her little help. At that very moment, he brought his face closer to her, and with a smile said that he had to catch a mermaid falling from the sky. Then he pressed her to him and kissed her on his forehead, while the girl laid her hand on his chest, smiling back. Lucretia watched in shock how the man asked if everything was fine, and Adelaide replied that everything was thanks to him. Cesare said that he would be better to suffer, and not her. The girl replied that he also could not get such injuries. Lucretia seemed to be torn from the inside, and she did not pay attention to when the Duke turned to her once again. Gathering her thoughts, the girl awkwardly replied that then she could take a look after him if he needed help. Cesare replied that there was no guilt in this, so he in no way can cause lady such inconvenience. In addition, his younger sister to take care of him, so everything is in order. These words were very wounded by Lucretia. She trembled that in order for the old business to take care of the man, even in one bedroom, they can be understood. But the response to this, the Duke only laughed, since her words were caused exclusively by jealousy, which she did not hide. Then he said that she was his younger sister, and he even thought that it was somehow sorry to give her into her brother's hands. Such a statement was even more angry with Lucretia, because the words of the Duke were said ambiguously and had subtext. After that, a pause came, during which the girl cried, once again trying to put pressure on pity. Cesare said that this time he would not connect her with what had happened, but this is only because there is no evidence. However, the second time there would be no. Hearing this, Lucretia flinched, decided that in this way she ruined the relationship. The man added that if she once again throws something like that, then the trial will switch to the interrod level. At the same time, Madame Flavius, nervously pacing along the corridor, and pondered the situation in which she found herself so stupidly. She grabbed her head, decided that there was no doubt, and the Lucretia plan failed, and now her name would be tarnished. At the same second, behind her, was heard the creak of the door, which she was very scared, because there was a man in a cloak. She immediately realized that he was moving in her direction, and then she found out, because of which she began to slowly go back. The mysterious guy turned to her, said that she should follow him in accordance with the order of the head of the clan. 10 minutes later, the carriage drove away from the mansion, heading for the port, where it was ordered to deliver Madame Flavia. The woman was tied up with her hands and eyes, so that she did not see the route, but she tried to find out from Eager where they were going. Then she screamed that she needed to meet with Mr. Cesare and explain everything to him, because she had a reason. However, the guy answered nothing, while maintaining a serious expression on his face, since he simply carried out an order for him. Having trembled, Flavia tried with the help of hearing to determine where the carriage was moving, but this was impossible. Suddenly, she shuddered when she heard the screams of gulls and the smell of seawater. Then she had practically no doubt. A few minutes later, a bandage was torn from her eyes, because of which sunlight blinded it, preventing it from being examined. When she was almost forcibly taken out of the carriage, she noticed another guy who said she was waiting for her. Flavia began to scream hysterically and asking her to take her to the master. Trying to explain that misunderstanding arose. The woman screamed in the throat that could explain everything. She was threatened, so she had no other choice. Gigi smiled. Thank you. Didn't she get a threat, not by the fact that she revealed Lady Adelaide? Then the guy reminded her of Omert. She violated the most important status, which was supposed to protect as a vassal. Omert is a code of silence, which is an oath of non-disclosure of any information seen or heard. All members of the nobility are connected with this oath, and those who violate it will receive due retribution, proportionate to the violation. Flavia realized that she would not be allowed to escape, but still tried to explain that she just gave her a hint. Putting his head and continuing to smile, the guy replied that, apparently, her hint was extremely exhaustive. Then he turned around, said that this was not his business, after which he proposed to finish with formalities and get down to business. Pointing to the ship, Gigi explained that it was built in 840, and now a lot of food has been loaded on board. In addition to food, there are also essential items like soap and candles that can help on the way. Then the guy added that taking advantage of this whole station, Madame could calmly get to Sorok on his own. Horror rolled up to the woman, because she knew that Sorok is the most distant place from Santnara, which is difficult to get to, and now he wants her to go to the open ocean on this vessel, which any wave can turn over. Gigi said that if she could return, then the master would take it for the will of the sea goddess and give her forgiveness. Flavia, that the blessing for the ship, on the nose of which there is no statue of the goddess, where there are, he sends her to death. When the secretary explained everything, he told Ajira that he finished, so you can start sending and returning. Fear surpassed the woman again with a new wave, because of which she began to pray for mercy, but no one listened to her. She pulled out and asked her to give her a chance, and only once to allow me to meet with the master in order to personally explain everything. Completely ignoring her requests, Gigi waved her and wished him a happy journey, asking him to beware of the jealousy of the goddess. Already being on the ship, the woman screamed that she did so for the sake of the master, and everything was for the sake of the Bonaparte clan. At the same time, Ithone helped Adelaide to take a bath, noting that she really had not suffered anywhere. A little darkened, the girl asked if they found a maid who encountered her, because now she was most interesting to her. Ithone hesitated before answering, trying to choose the right words in order to convey them to the lady. Then she said that she was discovered in a sewer. It was difficult to identify the body, but there was no place on the face of a living place. However, the color of the hair coincided with her testimonies. The maid was also without clothes. Probably someone tried to hide the evidence. And on her body, in the same place where the young master received a bruise, many deep-cut wounds were discovered. When asked what will happen to Lucretia, Ethne replied that there is no evidence, therefore, it cannot be held accountable. But it is not necessary to resort to some official measures, but then too much attention will be attracted. Lady Lucretius is extremely loved by ordinary people, and in high light it is known for outstanding appearance and knowledge. She shares them with great births, because if something happens to her, a wave of disapproval will ride among all, no matter how sad and unfair it may seem, but she will not bear the punishment that she really deserves. Adelaide understood this perfectly, because of which she received comforting gratitude from the maid, who was worried. Opening a small jar, Ethne added that there are good news that the lady must like. From today, she will be released from classes for some time, as the master ordered to repeat everything studied. Therefore, she will finally be able to rest a bit, and all the wounds on her legs will be able to completely heal without annoying them. Adelaida immediately asked what was with Madame Flavia, but the maid again stood a pause, trying to choose words. Then she said that the master was just in the process of searching for a new etiquette teacher, but you need to wait. The lesson will be updated as soon as the delegation from the Orsnan leaves. Until that moment, the lady will have free time. Turning away, the girl concluded that Madame Flavia was over, and she will never see this woman again. Recalling, Ethne asked, when she wants to change into a weekend outfit, Adelaide did not understand what was being discussed. The maid explained that the lady will treat the young master, so she will need special clothes. The girl was dumbfounded by such a turn of events, as she did not expect that she would really deal with Cesare's wounds. After half an hour, the Duke lay outdoors, when he suddenly paid attention to the girl who arrived at him. The man met his sister with a smile, who stood in front of him with a tray in his hands, on which there were medicines. Putting the tray on the table, Adelaida asked where it hurts, after which she looked in his direction, her eyes widened. The girl looked with admiration at his muscular back, and a strong relief that could be seduced by anyone. She could not take her eyes off the wide shoulders, the accurate camp of beautiful lines of muscles that form a narrow waist. Several scars from a sharp blade on the torso add its hazard image, as well as a mole just above the waist. Turning his head, Cesare said with a smile that she was admiring for too long, which could cause him suspicion. The girl immediately came to her senses, consciously that she really stared at this man too long. She immediately asked herself, completely foolish, after which she tried to explain herself, but she could not find the necessary words. Cesare said that he was quite charming, but do not get excited, no matter how beautiful this look. Adelaide was indignant and said that there was no such thing. The Duke turned away, answering, for example, he believed. Then he plopped down on his stomach, allowing the girl to start processing the wound, since she came precisely because of this. Adelaide swallowed, realizing that she had just got into a rather awkward situation, but she was here for the sake of another. He began to ring the instruments. She asked why he entrusted her treatment. She wanted her no special skills. Cesare lazily replied that there would be a lot of noise from Giotto, and Ithone would have complained endlessly, which was very annoying. In addition, he received this wound because of her, whether she had to take responsibility for what had happened and heal his wounds. Adelaide could not argue with this, after which she picked up the scissors, which to start cutting the bandages before processing. With neat movements, she began to cut the white fabric, the layer by the layer removing the bandages, trying not to hook the wound. With a sigh, she asked herself why she was so nervous, because nothing out of the row was going out. However, now she had the feeling that she was in the same room with a wild beast, and there was no way to escape. After that, she reached for the jar, saying that now she would apply an ointment, and then began to apply it into her hand. Looking at the man's back, Adelaide thought that abrasion was much more than she thought, and he probably was painful. Then she began to slowly apply the ointment, noticing that it begins early from the back and extends to the chest. The man shuddered when she asked to turn a little, because she did not reach the wound on her chest. The Duke replied that he did not want to. The girl tried to ask him to turn out at least very little, but he refused. She decided to go the other way, asking for permission to climb his bed for a while. This surprised the man. However, he smiled, answering that this is not necessary for this, thereby giving the girl a complete access to the bed. The expression on Adelaide's face did not change when she briefly thanked him, after which she asked for forgiveness. Following, she climbed onto the bed with a sharp movement, simultaneously holding the dress so that it did not accidentally lift it up. So it was much more convenient for her to process the wound. So she, without unnecessary thoughts, directed her hand to his chest. Suddenly, Cesare proposed to finish with this performance, after which he dropped all the medicines on the floor with a sharp movement. With a sharp movement, he grabbed the girl by the hands, after which he threw him onto the bed, preventing her from escaping. On that day, when the shoe cleaner fell from the bell tower, no one asked her if everything was in order, even the Duke himself. However, despite the fact that everyone turned away from the victim, there was no shadow of resentment on her face, because it was always like that. On the contrary, anxiety was read in her gaze aimed at her, but basically, no one paid attention to her. Cesare did not understand why she behaved so arrogantly and stupid, forever substituting her life under blow. After all, if not for him, she would have been dead for a long time, and in this case, who should regret whom in this situation? Then he decided that she probably had some other goal, and he had to definitely find out which one. Her intention to appear in front of him in such an outfit. All this was clearly for a reason. She clearly tried to seduce him. And the way she pretended that she was experiencing much more about him than about herself, although it is obvious that this is far from the case. The way her shoulders trembled, awakening the instinct of defense in him, all this, he only realized recently, and now he knew what to do. After all, if there weren't a secret motive, she would not have worried about a man who painfully stepped on her leg. Hanging over her, the man asked to call him Cesare, because for the bed, turning to him as a brother is not quite in place. However, Adelaide still called him a brother, added that she did not understand why he was acting so strangely. The Duke grinned again, asking her to finish his sweet performance, after which he turned to her by the present name. Cesare explained that he was a man. She is a woman, if you look closely, pretty, and her stupidity is even sweet. Then he stated that it would be gentle, as she wanted, so she should lie quietly. Such speeches greatly embarrassed the girl. In the life of Cesare, there was a countless number of women who somehow tried to achieve its location. However, there were even more disappointments, since all these girls were similar to each other in character and behavior. Therefore, the younger sister should not have become one of such women. But in the end, everything turned out wrong with her. Adelaide looked at her brother cautiously, trying to dissuade him from what he was going to do until he regretted it. In response to this, the man only smiled, answering that he seemed to have picked up an excellent actress, and his sister plays well. He himself thought that now she would probably pretend that he could not resist him, no matter how he tried. After all, her goal is nothing more than seducing a womanizer of the Bonaparte clan and an attempt to lead his life to an acceptable form. Continuing to hang over her, Cesare asked her to stop, since now she could be honest with him. Then he brought his face to the girl to a rather dangerous distance, saying that he would do what she would wish. Suddenly, he began to bring his lips closer to her, asking him to open his mouth so that this would finally happen. Suddenly, he asked himself how the contract with the Valles clan, if he crosses this line in a family relationship. After that, he began to consider the seductive body of Adelaide, realizing that he could hardly restrain himself now. Then, he decided that let the next generation be responsible for this, although they will probably consider this unjust. But then they could be born early, because this girl is not just beautiful, damn beautiful and seductive. Perhaps to sleep with her only once, and it will be too sorry to disperse. But now he agrees to such a situation. But suddenly, the man froze, feeling cold steel on his throat. Adelaide grabbed the scissors and put it to him. The girl pressed a little stronger to crush the skin, and Cesare noticed sincere discontent in her gaze. But instead of fear, a smile appeared on his face. But he did not expect such a turn, but was not going to retreat. The Duke asked why she took something so dangerous, and whether she was going to open his throat. She answered affirmatively. The man did not retreat, asking if the spirit was enough. The girl replied that he had forgotten, that she was from the slum of Kimor. Adelaide opened the scissors and began to crush harder, while Cesare realized that it seems that she was not joking at all. Without wasting time, he abruptly grabbed her hand, crushing her to the bed. But she did not let her scissors out of her hands. Still smiling, Cesare, with a mockery, asked if she was too fast for such statements. In his eyes, it was too stupid. Adelaide answered with discontent that he was too dissolving and vulgar. The Duke thought that even though he was fun before crazy, it does not look like a shoe cleaner was going to end. Previously, being in this state, he never restrained. But now, something did not allow him to continue. Removing his hands and raising, Cesare turned to Adele Vivi, asking if he was so that she hates him. After a small pause, the girl replied that she did not hatch, but she did not like such tricks at all. Therefore, she menacingly stated that her carnal joys did not interest her. In confirmation of this, she tightly squeezed the scissors. The man was surprised, but at the same time, he was amused by such an answer, because this girl was not like any other. Suddenly, he laughed loudly, thinking that she should say that he hates. It would be easier for him. After that, he began to slowly get out of bed, asked to finish with his treatment, as he should leave. Then, Cesare sat on the edge of the sofa, glancing at the girl with a lateral vision, and thinking how to be with her further. After all, now he really is sorry to give her loser Della Valle, who is definitely not worthy to possess such a treasure. In the evening, in Parliament, the man said that a few days ago he heard that the delegation of Orsinin had finally returned. Another person added that they were grateful to Bonaparte for the warm welcome and promised to visit him again. A bearded man praised Cesare for a good job. The Duke replied that he had only done what he had to. The man added that rumors reached him that during his last reception, he called Lady Lucretia to his office. Then he asked whether they should expect good news. But the Duke withstood a short pause before answering. He said that the reason for that conversation was not at all what they thought about, but he had something to tell her. When asked what exactly, Cesare replied that her parents who had previously left the house sent her younger sister to him. Such a statement dumbfounded all those present, after which they began to ask for which younger sister was talking about. The Duke prepared, so he said that he understood everything, and that they had many questions regarding this. However, he said that his sister's personality will be disclosed in a few months at the debutante ball, as expected. Then she will be able to meet with the son of the family Della Valle so that they have the opportunity to establish a relationship. Those present could not make peace of their ears, as they perfectly understood what kind of plan the Duke conceived. At that very moment, Cesare turned his head and directly said that he would deliberately send Adelaide to the Della Valle family. So the older brother, he simply cannot leave his younger sister of marriage age alone, so he will be a sacrifice. Luke Della Valle, who was the master of the clan, looked at the Duke with disbelief, but did not find what to answer. Cesare with a smile asked him, "Is this not a significant event for his kind? Because this marriage is much better. As a result, Lady Lucretia will not have to marry the prodigal son of Bonaparte." The chairman heard this phrase. The next day, when Adelaide came into the sight of Gigi, the guy immediately ran in her direction with a smile. With a delighted look, he stated that she was beautiful today, and he was amazed at this at each of their meetings. When he said that even the sea virgins would envy her face, a glass jar of ink flew into his back of his head. When the guy fell silent with a displeased look, Cesare greeted his sister with a smile, expecting from her reciprocity. In response, the girl bowed and greeted him. Effie did the same, only silently, not climbing into the conversation. The Duke noticed that for the first time, it was seen with the cleaner of the shoes after the case she put the knife to his throat. However, now the girl looked humbly, waiting for any order, which is why her appearance was innocent. Cesare said with a smile that he called her a different question today, so he offered to leave these awkwardness. At that very moment, two curious pairs of Ithoni and Gigi's eyes stared at her, who did not understand what they were talking about. Cesare ordered someone to enter, after which Aegir Korer entered the room with a slow gait, looking at the floor. The Duke explained that from today he will be her accompanying, so without him she will not be able to leave anywhere. Adelaide was surprised to hear his surname, after which she looked at Ethne, who did not give a look that she knew him. With a malicious smile, Cesare explained in between that Aegir, the younger brother of Aphone, as she could have guessed by her name. However, the guy did not even look at his sister out of the corner of his eye. Now he was in the service, and could not allow too much. Taking a closer look at him, Adelaide thought that for his younger brother, he was too young, although it really doesn't matter. After that, she bowed to him, saying that she was supposed to be on him. He replied that she would make every effort to protect her. Cesare and Gigi grinned that he was grabbing everything very quickly, because of which they were satisfied with the choice of the accompanying person. The Duke thoughtfully said that if someone was also fast, then I would initially knew that she was not just a maid in the mansion. The secretary replied that all because the lady had not even spent a month here for a month, and it was time for him to move to meet. Remembering this, Cesare said that time flies incredibly quickly, offering to finish it today. Then, he seemed to specially added that even for the sake of the younger sister, he could not linger, because of which she shuddered. Their eyes met while the girl was mentally trying to ask him to shut up, while the three were surprised to look at them. As soon as the audience came to an end, Adelaide and Ifan went to the chambers, slowly moving along the corridor. The girl's thoughts were busy Cesare, which is why she called him crazy, who does not even think what she was doing. At first, he himself seduced, overthrowed, and then took and changed his attitude, like some kind of raffle. Suddenly, she realized that for the first time, she saw his mole fabric so close, but she remembered this only now. At that moment, there was not a single thought in my head, but now all the details are slowly returning it to that very day. Frowning, she asked herself, and where he was so much beauty, because he wasted her left and right as he pleases. Obviously, he is a womanizer and a villain, but she definitely does not like him. But she was very excited about something. When they began to go down the stairs, they were met by the butler Ernst, who immediately called out Ethne. The maid quickly went downstairs, asking anxiously what happened. The butler hesitated before answering. Then he began to actively whisper something in her ear, and Aphone's face quickly changed and turned pale as he heard. Suddenly, she flinched, and thoughts and ideas quickly flashed through her head. How to organize everything as soon as possible. With a worried look, she asked him to convey that they would take time to put the outfit in order. The butler hastily retired, after which Aphone turned to Adelaide, saying that the chairman was waiting for her, and now she should go up to the Star Hall for an audience as soon as possible, which cannot be ignored in any way. Tailing the dress, Aphone said that the chairman was looking for a meeting with her, as the master revealed the fact about her, and she probably learns about their contractual relations, no matter how they hide. This bothered the maid all this time. However, she should never lie in any case, and if she gets a tricky question, it is better to simply remain silent. Adelaide nodded, but did not answer, mentally preparing for a conversation with her grandmother Cesare, who did not know much. After a couple of seconds, Ethne said that everything was ready, after which she wished her good luck and sent a lady to meet. When the girl first stepped into the Star Hall, the enthusiasm against the incredible beauty of the room immediately appeared on her face. The interior of the hall, made in dark colors, sharply contrasts with the fresh atmosphere of Santnara, which surprised. However, at the same time, this place literally blinds with its radiance. It was true beauty, accessible to few. A gray-haired woman with a short hairstyle was already waiting for her, turning her head and holding a kettle in her hands, thereby inviting. Adelaide decided that the first thing was to introduce herself, although it was customary to wait for a greeting from the elder in society. However, this situation is an exception, since the chairman herself was in front of her because she bowed. After greeting, the girl added that, to her shame, she was late with the performance, and then called her name. The woman did not answer, carefully looking at the girl who froze in a bow, waiting for an answer. At that very moment, the chairman put a notebook on the table, in which she greeted, and asked to call her Eve, a woman, a unanimously chosen chairman and parliament, Eve Bonaparte, who is also a grandmother Cesare. This is a well-known fact, that she was chosen due to the fact that she had universal recognition of her outstanding abilities. However, in addition, this woman also has a physical flaw, because of which she cannot speak, but only write. She recognized this much later than her appearance in the mansion. At the same moment, Eve asked how her tea was,